Hey guys, Luna here with a new video, and today we are going to rank the discography of the beautiful and talented Taylor Swift. Now, I've already done this video before, but for some reason it got claimed. I don't know, there wasn't any music on the video or anything like that. Actually, it had no views, no one watches my videos yet, but still it got claimed. So I said, let me just remove the video and do another one. This time I hope I don't get claimed. I'm not adding any music to the video, so yeah, I don't understand. But anyway, I'm doing the video again, and actually I'm quite glad I'm doing the video again because there are a few things that I wanted to change. I've heard the albums a couple more times now, and I think I have a different opinion from back then, so yeah. Now, this is not a full ranking of Taylor's discography. I'm only going to rank the top 5. The reason for that is basically because these 2 albums are a piece of shit, and the other albums are not that important. Remember, this is only my personal opinion, so if you don't agree with me and you have your own, leave it down below in the comments and I'll make sure to check it out. With that being said, let's just go for number 5. Now, I do know that Fearless is not everyone's favorite. Actually, many people would rather for me to put an album like Reputation and Lover instead of this album, but I actually believe that this album is not only better, but way more important in terms of, the evolution of Taylor as an artist. If you take a look at the albums prior to this one, you'll notice that this album was not only an evolution in Taylor as a songwriter, but also the album that really brought Taylor to worldwide success. And I personally believe that that is way more important than an album that just try to change Taylor's sound to a more soulless and just total sellout pop sound. For example, this album had a song that I remember back in the day being fucking everywhere. You Belong With Me was a song that you couldn't go any place without listening to it at least once. You go to the mall, this song was playing. You go to school, every girl in my classroom was singing along to this song. And I remember I had to hide, put my headphones on and hide because I was like in 6th grade back in 2009, and you couldn't listen to Taylor Swift at that age. You were automatically defined as sus. But not only is this album a testimony for Taylor's success, I believe that this album has amazing songs in it as well. For example, The Best Day is one of the best songs from Taylor. It's really emotional, and I believe that this was one of the first times where I really was involved with the lyricism in a Taylor Swift song. And even though the album is a bit repetitive, then that often makes it boring, and to be honest, I wouldn't listen to this album often. I believe the album is good. So yeah, the album is okay. I don't think the album is great. I don't think the album is bad. It's just good. Listen, if I only took the quality of the music to make this ranking, this album will be a number 2. Definitely. This album is amazing. It's one of the best things she has released. But this ranking also takes the importance of the album, how important the album was to the artist's career. And I believe that this album, because of Folklore, was unimportant. And actually, the first time I heard this album came out, I thought that it was like a different version from Folklore because the style is so similar. But no, this is a completely different album, and I think it's great. I think that it matches Folklore in terms of musical concept, and I just love the way it sounds, folky, indie. I love the lyricism in this album as well. But as I said before, even though I think this album is not only better but way better than the ones on top of it, I believe that this album is really unimportant. I remember Folklore being this just incredible surprise from Taylor, just a folk album, because Folklore is basically a folk album. The name says it. It's really relaxing, and I believe that even though this album is quite similar, they're not the same thing. Folklore represents way more, and that's the reason why this album is at number 4. It has amazing songs. There's not something like a bad song on this album. Evermore is an amazing song. Champagne Problems is an amazing song. Willow is an amazing song. There's just too many good tracks on this album, and I feel bad putting it at number 4. But as I said, I believe that this album is better than number 3 and number 2. But because number 3 and number 2 were more important for Taylor's career, I'm gonna put this album at number 4. I just like this album a lot, and I think that it's one of her best, but it's only number 4 on this list. I'm sorry. I know that it's a great album, but listen. The album Red sits at number 3 only because I believe that number 2 was more important to her career, but in terms of quality they match up, and even this album picks up a little bit more. This album was the first time that Taylor said goodbye to every single country influence in her music. You know, this album was basically a pop rock record. Songs like State of Grace, Red, We're Never Going Back Together represented a different approach to songwriting for Taylor. Songs like 22 were the anthem to the hipster community, you know, with the glasses and the red t-shirts. You know, I just loved that time of my life, and you know, this whole album represents a time where we people who are 20, 21 years old now were, you know, only starting to get into the social media world and all of that. So, and then you have I Knew You Were Trouble with Taylor trying to go for dubstep music. I don't know, mixing electronic music with Taylor Swift, I don't think it's a good idea, but somehow this song works. So yeah, I believe that this album showed Taylor going for something new, but still without style that everyone loves, in songs like All Too Well, Back to December, and even though some of the songs in here are horrible, for example, Stay, 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 probably the worst song in this album. I remember the first line from this album, or the first verse, was about Taylor arguing with her boyfriend, and then in an argument she throws the phone at him. So now every time he comes to visit Taylor, he's wearing a football helmet. What? But this album is amazing. I love it. I think it's a great album. And you know, even though the music quality isn't all that great, it has a lot of variety, and I think that it's really entertaining. Great album. The reason why this album is at number 2 is because it's definitely the time where Taylor was just on top of the world. Everyone knew who Taylor Swift was, and even though Taylor was already really popular before this album, this was a time where everyone knew about Taylor. Every single person on the planet was aware of Taylor's existence by the time this album dropped. And I believe that that not only represents how big this album is, but also represents the fact that she managed to mix good music with popularity. And if you take a look at the Billboard charts right now, you know that that's not often seen. At a time where Justin Bieber, Ed Sheeran, Katy Perry, Rihanna, Drake were releasing records, really popular records, Taylor Swift came on top of everyone and showed every single person on the world that she was the biggest star, male or female. Everyone just knew that she was on top. In terms of music quality, the album is just as good as Red from 2012. The songwriting is more mature, even though we're still talking about exes. The production on this album was amazing. Her voice sounded so good. The instrumentals of the song sounded so good. And even though in Red she already showed that she was going for this pop style approach to the music, in this album she capitalized it and she committed to this new style and she completely killed it. Songs like Blank Space, Bad Blood, New Romantics, Welcome to New York, Shake It Off, which is probably one of her best songs, period. I mean, the song is amazing. And even the whole energy behind this album, you know, you really felt like you were listening to something iconic. And even though in terms of music quality, there are just hundreds of albums better than this one released in the 2010s, I believe that in terms of popularity, you know, the mix between popularity and quality, this album was just a perfect thing. The only reason why I don't put this album at number 1 is because after this album and 2 incredibly shitty albums, she came back with not 1 but 2 albums that were way better than this one. So yeah, let's go on with number 1. This album is great. Good album. Folklore is everything I ever wished since the first time I listened to Taylor Swift. The thing is that often Taylor in her music talks about exes and how she hates them now and how she used to love them and how she's just the best option. She's the best girl in the world. You know, this teenage-like lyrics, I don't enjoy them. I believe that once you are a certain age, you can't feel related to this type of ex situations. I always hated the fact that you could tell that Taylor was such a talented woman and you know, her lyrics were really good. The ability to tell a story was amazing, but she wasted it talking about, you know, relationships and exes and you know, and being a cheater. I just didn't like that. I wanted an album where Taylor actually took the issues of her life and expressed them throughout the songs. And that is what this album is. The reason why this album, even though it's folk music, only folk music, is more entertaining than any other Taylor Swift album, she actually gives detail on her emotions, and with the help of a beautiful instrumental behind her, she tells the stories not only about exes but also about childhood memories, nostalgia, friends, the friends that are no longer friends. And even though this album has a few things that I don't quite like, for example, the feature of Bon Iver, I don't know what Bon Iver has to do with Taylor Swift. I didn't like that song. The album is filled with amazing songs. Cardigan is an amazing song. The Last American Dynasty was an amazing song. The opening track, The One, is just a wonderful song. Not only because she reminisces about what could have been of a relationship, but the emotion that she portrays through her vocals are amazing. I'm not going to waste time talking about the instrumentals on this album because it is not the main target of the album to impress you with music complexity. This album is really similar to some of my favorite artists like Leonard Cohen, for example. You don't listen to a Leonard Cohen album to listen to the instrumentals. You actually do the exact opposite. You want to know what Leonard has to say, and I believe that it's the same thing with this album. This album is amazing, and I believe that everyone should listen to this album at least once if you are a Taylor fan. The same thing with Evermore. I believe that Evermore is as good as this album, but it's not as important. This was the first time that Taylor took the time to write music that actually showed emotion in terms of the lyrics of the album, detail on the songs that one can feel related to even if you haven't gone through these situations, So yeah, Folklore is definitely an amazing album, and even though I don't think it's the best album of the year or the decade, I believe that this is just the best piece of music that Taylor has given to us, and I appreciate it. I hope we listen to more things like this in the future, and I will, be on my toes waiting for the next album Taylor releases. That is it for today's video, guys. I really hope that you enjoyed it. If you did, please leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of the videos that I upload. It was really fun going through these albums again. I believe that I really had no time to listen to the albums when I did the first ranking, but now I had more time, so I think that I could express myself better about these albums and why I like them. I don't really spend that much time talking about the actual music of the album because Taylor has always kept a certain style that she doesn't go out from. I think that if you go for a Taylor Swift album, you should really pay attention to the lyrics and to her voice and how beautiful the melody is, rather than, the musical complexity, because there's not much. So yeah. As I said before, this is only my personal opinion, so if you have your own list, please be free to leave it down below and I'll make sure to check it out. So yeah, that will be it for today, guys, and I hope you enjoyed it. Bye.